FYI webinar series. This is our first webinar for 2014, and we're very excited. Today we have Michael Pease, who is a retired senior agriculturalist for the World Bank, and he now resides in Portugal. He'll be talking about an effort he's trying to kick off to honor some Portuguese fishermen who actually saved some soldiers during World War II. So he'll give us a little bit of a history lesson and talk to us about the importance of having this kind of a memorial in Portugal. Everybody that is attending is on mute, and we do this so that there is no background noise or any distractions. But you can submit your questions through the chat module. It's on the right-hand side of your screen in the GoToMeeting console. So just type your questions, and we will ask or address the questions at the end of Michael's presentation. And then after the presentation, if you think of some additional questions, you can always send us an email to palcus@palcus.org. So without further ado, I would like to introduce today's presenter, Michael Pease, and I'm going to go ahead and give you control, Michael, so you can flip through your slides.
Righty-ho. Well, thank you, Angela and Palcus, very much for your invitation to speak. I very much appreciate that. When we did a practice run on Monday, my mouse froze, so I hope that won't happen this time. I'm sure it won't. I've got spare batteries. But anyway, also in terms of thanks, I would like to thank very much FLAD, which is the Fundação Luso-Americana para o Desenvolvimento, and FLAD have helped us financially regarding the production of brochures. So I'm most grateful to them, and I'm also grateful to Dr. Antonio Neto da Silva, who is the head of the Associação da Amizade Portugal in Estados Unidos. Both of these are organizations that promote friendship between Portugal and the United States, and it's with the latter that the bank account has been established for receipt of funds for the project that I should be talking about to you this afternoon. And finally, I would like to thank very much Carlos Guerrero, who is a journalist who carried out much of the initial research of the specific incident which I should be talking about, and he's given me free access to all the information he's gathered, and he's been a source of much help to me. Now, the presentation centers on one particular incident, which is the crash of Flight 63931, and the rescue of survivors by Portuguese fishermen. And wait a minute, I want to click. Oh, there we go. Sorry, I don't seem to have got my. There it is. I'm just going to go back a second. Sorry, half a second. There we go. I'm learning my way around this in a minute. There we go. What Angela has done is to put as a centerpiece here, it's in fact a possible sculpture that we might have that we could be putting up in memorial for fishermen. But it'll reappear a bit later in my talk when I talk about the more specific, because I'm going to be talking about the general aspect of Portugal before I come to the specific, because I think it's very important to grasp the significance of Portugal's role in World War II before looking at the specific incident. First of all, to show you myself, that's a picture of myself. This was at a time when I was working on soil stabilization and erosion control with an international non-government organization. I don't do that now, I got a bit older. So there we go. Now, here we go. Now, this, I'm going to spend quite a little time on this because I think it's important, I think it's helpful if I go through in some detail the geography and facts surrounding the Battle of the Atlantic, the Eastern Atlantic, which so affected Portugal and its central position. I hope you can all see my arrow here. Portugal, of course, on the eastern seaboard of the Atlantic. And so the issue here was this, that Britain survived on its trade for food and its means of waging war from various sources. Firstly, through the Mediterranean, from Suez Canal, of course, past Gibraltar and up into the North Atlantic and home and into Britain, passing, of course, the shores of Portugal. Secondly, there was the route that passed by the Cape of Good Hope, South Africa, from, of course, India and the Far East, and all the resources of rubber and tin and metals that came from there. They all passed through and up towards Freetown. Finally, there was the southern movement from the United States that passed through the northeastern part of South America, and also went through to Freetown. Freetown in Sierra Leone, of course, was the collection point for convoys moving up past the Azores and into England. Finally, there was the northern route, the much famed and terrible northern route, which was shorter, of course, from Canada and the United States over into America, but we're not really dealing with that. Now, Britain was utterly vulnerable. This was its lifeline. This was its jugular for food and supplies. Cut this, and Britain was gone. So we'd got Germany had, in the 1940s, taken over much of Western Europe. It hadn't taken over Spain and Portugal, but it had planned for that. I'll come to it in a minute. But it had taken over much of Western Europe, and Britain lay in its grasp. And Britain depended upon its jugular vein for food and munitions. And so everything hinged upon that, and Portugal was central to it. So Portugal might have been neutral, but its role was tremendous in the survival of Britain. And Britain's survival depended upon really the Western world, because Hitler had his grand plans for world domination, which would have moved westwards across the Atlantic and ultimately to the United States, as I will explain. Now, I'm going to go through one or two little things that will appear as I talk, but on this map, it's perhaps easier to sort of get it. To start right at the very beginning, I'm pointing my arrow, I hope you can see it, to southern Portugal, Plymouth, which is where the RAF had their air base, and that after 1940, when Germany had taken over France, they established bases here in the Bay of Biscay, which I'm circling here, and there was only 330-odd kilometers between these two, but it made all the difference because the Germans had their base here in Bordeaux, and that 330 kilometers made a great deal of difference in their operations around the Atlantic in controlling the submarine warfare. Carrying on then into Spain and Portugal, firstly, Germany had its plans for the capture of Spain and Portugal through Operation Felix. It never initiated them, of course, but in fact it shelved them in 1942. But they had plans for the takeover of Spain and the takeover of Portugal, which would, of course, involve the Azores. Now, I'm going to just divert a moment to the Azores, because the Azores were so central, so important, so central. There they are, central in the Atlantic. Now, and firstly, Salazar, then dictator of Portugal, had plans for moving his government to the Azores, which he would have done with the aid of Royal Naval ships, in fact, and he would have moved his government to the Azores, leaving only the GNR, the police forces, in command of Portugal. In other words, a token resistance. Had that happened, it didn't, thank God. Now, Operation Felix, had Germany cared to operate it, but it was too involved in other matters to do so, would have involved the invasion of Spain and Portugal, then the capture of Gibraltar, which is here as I point, and of course then the loss of North Africa, the Mediterranean, Malta, and so on. Now, North Africa, I shall be coming later on to North Africa, where Operation Torch landed and established an air base of critical importance at Fort LEIPZIG, but I will explain that. My arrow is pointing at it now, but in North Africa, very little distance between the south of Portugal. Faro, where I shall be talking about where the memorial would go, is in southern Portugal, pointing at about there where I am on my arrow that I hope you can see. So there was only a short distance between Portugal and North Africa. The Azores itself, just returning a moment, was so critical that in 1940 and 41, there were undercover operations conducted by Umberto Delgado, who was later assassinated under the regime of Salazar, and Wing Commander Ventris of the Royal Air Force. These were undercover missions to explore the potential of establishing an air base in the Azores, and fortunately they did so, because this was in 40-41, when Salazar decided that the war was clearly going the Allies' way, this now in October 1943. It was a very relatively simple operation using mast and matting to lay an airstrip as a result of the undercover operations of Ventris in the Azores. But the Azores were always critical. Potentially the government would have moved to the Azores, but it lay right in the middle of the Azores. Eventually, when an airstrip was put in right at the end of 1943, and American Seabees came in to construct from those initial procedures. It gave them a radius of a further 1,300 kilometers up into the Atlantic, and at that point that really completely turned the U-boat battle of the war. Further south was Madeira, which played a much lesser role in the war. There were incidents, but of much lesser significance. The Canary Islands down below were of importance. I shall be bringing them out again when I'm talking a little bit about the submarine warfare. So, and I think I've already said that Freetown, which is the capital of Sierra Leone, was the center for the convoys establishing. But the critical point here is that this was the lifeline on which Britain depended. Take out Britain, and you've now got a situation where the world lay at Hitler's feet. He then could turn to the complete annihilation of the USSR, and then moving westwards towards the United States, as again I shall explain. But I'm hoping that that lays a sort of a background to what the situation, and I shall be explaining a little bit more later where we go. Now I'm going to press my little arrow there. There we go. And so now this Treaty of Windsor, which not so many people know about, but it's very, very important. It dates back to 1373, this Treaty of Windsor binds Britain and Portugal to come to each other's defense in time of trouble. And it's still existent, and people perhaps forget about it, but it's a very important thing. And Salazar recognized it, respected it, and it really was a critical feature in his whole approach to Britain, and always has been, and still to this day has value, but I can't go into some of the details of that. But believe me, the Treaty of Windsor of 1373 is still a valid and a very important document. Now I'm going to try and find my arrow. Funny, now I haven't got an arrow. Oh, here we go. The arrow, without me pointing at the arrow, it came. Oh, whoa, I don't want to go there. I want to go back one. Can you back me one, please, Angela? We seem to. Oh, here we are. Here are my arrows. Come back. There we go. So here's a comment that is well worth recording, which was made by Prime Minister Canning. Canning was, in fact, an ambassador to Portugal at a time, but he said that while Great Britain has an arm to raise, it must be raised against the efforts of any power that should forcibly. I'm trying to move this slide. I can't see it very well. Okay, never mind. Forcibly attempt to control the choice and fetter the independence of Portugal. So, again, emphasizing the importance of these two. Now, sorry, Angela, I think you're going to have to give me. I can't get my little arrows. Oh, there they are. They come again. Fine. Okay, they come back in. Except that my screen can I not move it? I wanted to move my screen to the left because it's the screen is cut off. Can we move all your bit to the right to allow me to read the screen? Can you do that, Angela, please?
That's on your computer.
All right. Well, I'll do it. I'll just do it without. So now, these I think are very important comments from General Walther von REICHENAU, who made it in Leipzig in the summer of 1938. But they're very present. They're well worth reading in full. The most important of sea and latterly also air routes lead along the Portuguese coast and can be either defended or attacked from it. Portugal's bridge-like position towards Africa is obvious. So is its close connection with the Mediterranean basin. Madeira is ideal as an observation post at the entrance to the Mediterranean. The Azores, protruding as they do westwards, are bound to play a big part in international aerial intercourse over the Atlantic. The right to use them would free England from many a care regarding supplies of food and raw materials in wartime. Together with the Cape Verde Islands, the Azores are along the first half of the seaway to South Africa. The southern half route leads past Portuguese Guinea, Sao Tome and Principe, and towards Angola. The mayor thought these positions might someday fall. Might someday. Where was I now? Might someday fall into the hands of the enemy is irreconcilable with the existence of the British. This clearly shows why, in view of the altered conditions, Mediterranean, Britain needs friendship more than ever. Now, this was very impressive. This written, bear in mind, in 1938. And not only that, but the German Minister of War, Field Marshal von Lomberg, he visited Madeira and the Azores, and I'll bet it wasn't on holiday. He visited because he also realized, as Minister of War, how significant these were going to be in time of war. So then I also want to bring out a further comment by Minister McCanning. While Great Britain has an arm to raise, it must be raised against the efforts of any power that should forcibly attain to control the choice and fetter the independence of Portugal. I thought we'd done it before, didn't I? Sorry, I don't know why, but I'm having a certain now. So now I've got here a picture of Admiral KARL von DONITZ. And he was the U-boat, the German U-boat commander. Just to sort of make the picture look nice, I've shown a Dornier flying boat and a U-boat, but really just to make it a little bit pretty. Now, the critical issue here was this, that I've explained the vulnerability of Britain and how Germany was determined to take Britain out. Now, Hitler listened to Göring, the Luftwaffe controller, rather than Karl Donitz, the head of the Kriegsmarine and U-boats. Just as well for the Allies that he did so, because, as it happened, Göring, despite his best efforts at bombing Britain into submission, failed. The Battle of Britain was won by Britain, and Germany then had to turn around, and it then moved eastwards to attack the USSR and abandoned its hopes of attacking Britain. Now, Admiral Karl Donitz served in the World War I, and he recognized the enormous significance of submarine warfare, how it could throttle this lifeline that we saw when I was looking at the map, and he realized that given sufficient support, he could throttle that lifeline and bring Britain to his knees. In my opinion, and in many others, he was right. Fortunately, he was really starved of weaponry, because whilst he had some 1,100 submarines in total, they were deployed in various areas. Hitler was always very conscious of invasion of Norway, so he always held some submarines up there. And he was also bound to support Rommel in North Africa and held submarines there. There were numerous minor requirements. There were always submarines in repair. They trained in the Baltic, and the Baltic sometimes was frozen. And above all, the bombing efforts of the United Forces, the Allies, against Germany made the repair and construction of submarines very difficult. So Dornitz's plans, I think he was absolutely right. he could have brought Britain to its knees, but Hitler made the wrong choice. He chose to listen to Goering, and as a result, Britain survived. But had KARL DONITZ had his way, I think it might have gone very differently indeed. He was a great commander. Now, a comment that I do wish I could move this screen a bit, but is there any way that I can move this screen?
Michael, it's not.
No, okay, no matter. Well, I'll get it right. Not to worry, not to worry. So now, this is a comment made by Winston Churchill, which was very appropriate. He said, the Battle of the Atlantic was the dominating factor all through the war. Never for one moment could we forget that everything happening elsewhere, on land, at sea, or in the air, depended ultimately on its outcome. And amid other cares, we view its changing fortune day by day with hope or apprehension. So Churchill saw this absolutely clearly. And one other comment that I'm going to get up, here we go, and also by Churchill, when he said the only thing that ever really frightened me during the war was the, I don't want to go there again, sorry. I'd like to go back. Come on, where's it going to come back? There we go. Sorry. I want to go back one more. There we are. No, now it's gone forward. Excuse me for this, but I'm learning these things in a matter. And now this, the second comment he made, this was much, much later in the war, really towards the end of the war, and he said the U-boat attack was our worst evil, and it would have been wise for the Germans to stake all upon it. This sort of reinforcing exactly what I was saying earlier on, that in fact it was the U-boat attack that really could have been at greatest, could have caused greatest peril. Now, one or two U-boat war factors that I've just listed down here, which may help to sort of appreciate the general situation. Donitz foresaw Britain's vulnerability. I've already described that. I've said the Azores, when we were looking at the map, how central this was to the control of the Atlantic. The Azores are about 600 kilometers long, east to west. They're about 1,500 kilometers from the mainland, and about 1,500 kilometers to Labrador, and about 3,700 to the east coast of America. So they were central and very, very key. Both sides realized this. In fact, that Hitler had wanted Grand Admiral Raeder to invade and take over the Azores fairly early on in the war, but Raeder denied, said he could not possibly do this. He could successfully occupy the Azores, but he was aware that he would not be able to hold them against the might of the United States and the British naval forces. So that was abandoned. But equally, both Churchill and Roosevelt also considered, despite our ties with Portugal, to take over the Azores by force. So critical were they. However, fortunately, we had the British ambassador, Campbell, in Lisbon, paid up some sense and said, look, this is much better handled diplomatically rather than military, and cooled Churchill and Roosevelt down on the matter. But they always were so critical, and it wasn't until towards the end of '43 when it was quite obvious to Salazar which way the war was going to go, that he allowed first British forces and then American forces to occupy the Azores and to construct an airfield. What happened was that a British force commanded by Air Chief Marshal Rommel landed and started constructing. Later on, American Seabees came in, and the great Air Force base at Larges was constructed, and that drove the submarines well out 1,300 kilometers from that area, and really was a deciding factor. So I've put here, by the end of 1942, Britain was nearly starved to defeat. I mean, it was a very, very close thing indeed. During its supplies, I have said something about during its supplies. They were agreed. Hitler would say, yes, sure, you can have what you want, but it didn't come. And so during its supplies of strangling Britain by submarine attack never came to fruition, though they certainly could have done. There were 1,150 U-boats constructed during World War II, but at any one time, there were never that many going. There were in 1942 there were 91, and in 1943 there were only 140. But that was still quite enough to cause a great deal of destruction. Subsequently, in the middle of in about 1942, milch cows these were very big submarines, and they were based often on the Canary Islands, which I pictured to you in the general map of things. And these were simply supply submarines for the ordinary U-boats, and they increased the range by some 6,000 kilometers. Now, there was a bit of a naughty here, because they were often supplied by, in the Canary Islands, which were called Spanish, and Franco cared to ignore the treaties of neutrality, and whereby ships could only be supplied at rather distant intervals. But he denied this, and so milch cows were able to get supplies, as were U-boats, in the Canaries, contrary to rules of neutrality. Now, the Bay of Biscay, I did show it to you briefly on the map, if you remember, which was absolutely critical. There were, I'll show you a map in a minute or two, but there were 5 basic U-boat bases there, and it took, because of the proximity of Plymouth, about 330 kilometers to the north, submarines were obliged to go underwater, much slower, of course, and take 10 days to get in and 10 days to get out, and that's where a huge number of losses occurred. And so, finally, North Atlantic operations were discontinued in about mid-1943. I have to say about the intelligence war was won finally by the Allies at the end of 1942. Initially, the Germans had the advantage through their B-Dienst, where they knew where convoys were going, but subsequently, with the Bletchley Code breakage of Ultra and the Enigma codes, the intelligence war was really critically won by 1942. But DONITZ was always complained greatly that he was ill-served by intelligence. Now, again, I'm going to be looking for this. I want to change the screen, but well, yeah, we'll change it anyway somehow. So I've now, you remember on the bigger map, here we go. Here's the United Kingdom, and Plymouth is there, which I told you was some 300-400 kilometers distant from Merignac, which here was the German Luftwaffe base. Now that was very significant. Portugal, of course, lying further to the south here. There were 5 major pens that were constructed. I don't need to go into all the details. All the way along here, that the headquarters was originally Lorient, but it moved to Paris subsequently. DONITZ moved because it was too dangerous. And all this area here was very dangerous indeed for movement of submarines because of the attacks from Plymouth, and so they had to go underwater and much slower. But this was a major area of submarine warfare. Oh, good, my arrows are back now. Let's have another look. Let's press that one. There we go. There we go. And so this is just simply a little bit of, oh dear, no, it's done that. I didn't do that, but it did. Now, this is simply rather sort of a graphic depiction, simply to sort of, it's a pretty. There's a U-boat and a flying boat up above, a ship having been sunk, and it sort of dramatizes the overall situation. Now, finally, I just want to say something about the German threat to the United States, again, which is often underplayed and perhaps known about too little. And war games were played as far back as 1897-98, which planned the invasion of the United States using the Azores naval bases. Even then, it was fully recognized. In the middle of World War I, the Germans planned to occupy the Azores archipelago for further expansion westwards. Now, in World War II, Project America envisaged very long-range aircraft. They had, in Messerschmitt's works, had an aircraft that could have flown happily from the Azores, where they would have established, obviously, an air base, and they could have started bombing the mainland USA. They would then have landed. They had extensive work in South America, and indeed even in the United States, where planes could have landed, refueled, and returned. And as I've just said here, prior to land invasion that was supported by internal pro-Nazi groups. So that now ends my presentation of the start. Ooh, right, there we go. There we go. Ah, brilliant. And of the general scene, I've put the framework behind the real story of. Oh dear, no, I didn't do that. I'm going to go back in. Behind the scene, which I'm going to tell you of this particular. So I wish I wouldn't do that. So here we go. One tale of the heroism of Portuguese fishermen in rescuing from the sea, from the Eastern Atlantic, those in need from whatever nationality during World War II. Now, essentially, from the geographic position of Portugal, the Azores and Madeira, it was necessarily very involved in the war, even as a neutral country. And many rescues were made, not only of allies, but of Germans. Italians weren't involved in that sphere, but also of civilian boats. And this heroism of Portuguese fishermen is something of great credit that, in my opinion, should not be lost. Now, I'm going to be telling you now about a story that was dug out by Carlos Guerrero particularly, and I have a great deal of gratitude to him for the pictures and much of the information that I should be telling you. Now, this is a picture of a little 5-meter fishing boat, only 5 meters. It did have a mast, and it was manned basically by oars, and the heroes of the whole story are José Mascarenhas, Jaime Nunes, and the 13-year-old son of José Mascarenhas, Manuel, in Faro fishing harbor. In those days, this Faro fishing harbor really was a fishing harbor. Nowadays it's a marina. I shall be showing you that later. And it's, to this day, you can see there, that's the fire station, and over here is what we call a Misericordia, which is really a hospital. Now there's a hotel over here. And these were the 3 heroes. And they set out, they were going to fish for bass, and they set out on November the 30th, 1943. And where they went, they moved they rowed out through the Rio Formosa, which is all waterways, out here to beyond the reaches here, where they were fishing for bass. And with them, they had mighty little. They had some jackets, some clothes, not much. They had some sandwiches, probably, or some odd food. They would have had a little lantern. They really were just out for the night, but it was a cold, dark night. No moon. Storms were forecast, and high tide was at 6 p.m. when they went out. And so they would have moored out here off BARETA Island and cast out their nets and sat back and waited for the fish to come. Unbeknownst to them, other events were to take place. So now we move to one. Well, there we go, great. Oh, now it's on the sorry about all this. There we go, right. Now you'll remember from the big map that I showed Portugal's position in North Africa. Now, this is where we come. Here's Portugal now, nice clearly marked. Faro was the capital of Portugal, where this particular event took place. It's about midway, roughly, along the southern coast of Portugal. And only some 330 kilometers down here is Kenitra, or Fort Leite. Now, what happened was that in November 1942, the Americans landed in North Africa, whilst the British were pushing up, also made landings, were pushing up from the east, and with the idea of driving out the Axis forces, Italian and German, from North Africa. So the proximity now became quite close between Portugal and the air bases at Kenitra here in North Africa. So bear in mind that the fishermen were out here fishing for their bass, unknowing as to what was actually happening further south. Further south here 4 aircraft took off. They were PB-4Y1 aircraft, Liberator bombers, and they were moving out this direction off the map towards the Azores. Their job was to escort convoys and to hunt for submarines. And it was a long, long journey of 13 hours they were out. So the 4 aircraft did their patrol duties, and duly 2 of them returned successfully to their base at Kenitra. 3rd got close by, ran out of fuel, crashed into the sea, and all died. Now the 4th one came along the coast of Portugal, and by this time it had navigational problems because it was receiving conflicting signals from both Spain and Portugal and Morocco, and it basically got lost. And they realized they did not have enough fuel to get back to Fort Kenitra, Fort Lauti, down in Spain. So they were going to have to abandon their ship, abandon their craft. They first thought they would do so over the land of Portugal, but they decided that was too rough and rocky, and to parachute down would have been disastrous. So they decided it was better to ditch into the sea south of FARO. And they first of all abandoned their munitions. Their munitions would have consisted of depth charges and bombs, and so they dropped those into the sea. They then prepared to, this now quite late, on the evening of November the 30th, 1943. And they finally crashed into the sea, very close, really quite close, to 4 heroes who we've just met earlier, who were fishing off the sea here. So now we go to the next one. So just to give you some idea of distances, FARO to Kenitra, which I've been talking about Fort Laote quite a bit, is about 300 kilometers. It's off my screen. So I'll pass on to this. Now here is a picture of a USA Liberator bomber. It had a crew of 11. It was designed for long flights, 13 hours, as I've told you, out of Fort Laote. And it was one of these that crashed into the sea close by to where Jaime Nunes, Mascarenhas, and his son Manuel were fishing. And I'm going to try and fly. There we go. And so in 1901, in 2001, the wreck of this plane was discovered, it's now been declared a national wreck. That was in 2007, and these are the pictures of where it is. It can be viewed, but it is a national wreck, so it is preserved. Now, when the plane crashed, I'll just go, there we go. So when the plane, no, I'll go back one. When the plane crashed, the fishermen, José Mascarenhas, Jaime Nunes, they abandoned their nets and they rowed as fast as they could to the sinking aircraft. One wing had already come off, and they hauled the 6 crew that survived onto their little tiny 5-meter fishing boat. We've now got 9 souls in this tiny fishing boat. You can imagine it would have been extremely difficult, and it was pictured right at the very beginning of this presentation. So 5 of them, however, died. They'd gone down into the bomb bays, which in fact was incorrect procedures. They were not meant to do that, but they did, and they drowned. So of the 11 crew, 6 survived, 5 died. Now the 6 that were on Jaime Nunes and José Mascarenhas' boat, 4 were in reasonable shape. I've got them all pictured up here. The 2, Schultz and one other, were badly injured. Schultz subsequently had to have his leg amputated. Now, these 4 were repatriated up to Lisbon, and I might say that there was a naval attaché, fortunately, in FARO, who arranged for the crash to be recorded outside Portuguese waters, so they weren't interned and they were able to be moved from Lisbon to Gibraltar and back to Fort Laote. So they were all right. Now, I've got insert here Lyle Van Hook. Now, Carl Guerrero, with his brilliant investigative journalism, got in touch with Lyle Van Hook. And between them, they said, well, you know, this is really awful, that the Jaime Nunes and Mascarenhas had been sidelined by the local authorities. Nothing had been given to them in reward. Jaime Nunes had lost his coat. They got no praise whatsoever. And Carlos Guerrero, out of the goodness of his heart, and Lyle Van Hook said this ought to be repaired. And it took them an awful long time, but by sheer persistence, they finally got acknowledgement. And so just a moment on the crew details. Here, the minor injuries were Leo Trum, the pilot you've just seen, Eden, Pierce, and Van Hook. Seriously injured were McCoy and Stultz, who lost his leg, and the killed were listed there. Now, there we go. So now I'm jumping a little bit. I'll come back to that where we were in a minute. But in total, in the Eastern Atlantic, sea rescues by Portuguese, there were 10 rescues from downed planes, 28 rescues from sunken ships. There were 128 survivors, 7 dead, all by fishing boats. So the total rescues of all Portuguese vessels were 1,282 survivors and 453 dead. I haven't been able to get any information on Luftwaffe and Kriegsmarine personnel. I have written to Germany, but I can't get the personnel. But I doubt if many Kriegsmarine personnel were saved because they would have been gone down with their submarines. Luftwaffe, perhaps a few. Now, here we go. So, just looking at the chronological order of what really has happened here. At about 5 p.m., Jaime Nunes and José Mascarenhas left Faro fishing harbour on their fishing expedition. The high tide, as I've already told you, was about 6 o'clock, and they arrived at the fishing grounds off BARETA Island. At 9, the 4 U.S. bombers departed for Fort LEIPZIG. As I've mentioned to you, there was the navigational error, and they jettisoned their ordnance. They ditched off BARETA Island, the plane, this is the PB, flight 63931, and just shortly before 2300 hours. The Faro Fire Service were alerted, but couldn't find anything, they came back. Then by December the 1st, or 2nd, as I've said, the Jaime Nunes, José Mascarenhas, their boat, their little 5-meter boat, crammed with 9 personnel in, were unable to move because of the low tide. So they weren't able to dock in Faro Harbour until 3:30 the following morning. At that point, they were taken to the local Misericordia, that's the local hospital. However, there was a power cut, so there was no X-ray. That created a problem. Fortunately, there was a naval attaché in Faro at the time, and he was able to arrange that the crash occurred outside Portuguese waters, so the return of the survivors was possible to Fort LEIPZIG. Now, I put here in November 1993, through sheer persistence, Carlos Guerrero wrote an article describing the incident and contacted the crew member Lyle Van Hook. He initiated action towards the recognition of Portuguese actions. And finally, in 1999, and I think this is a remarkable persistence by Carlos and Lyle Van Hook, an official ceremony did occur at Gambellas University in Faro when a plaque was presented to Jaime Nunes. I'll show you a picture in a minute. And I've already talked about the plane wreck, and so I think I can now move on if I have my little arrow. There we go. So now there's Jaime Nunes. He's pretty tiny, isn't he? With we'll get back in. With the representative from the American embassy handing him a plaque, and that's what Jaime Nunes got. The other two, Mascarenhas and his son, had already died by this time, so it was only he who got that plaque, which is still in existence, held by the family to this day. He, of course, is dead now. And so now we come on I then entered the scene because I felt that there was a need for a memorial to be constructed. And I've had great support from the mayor and the presidents of culture and of tourism, and they have allocated an area overlooking the marina, which is here. It's got electricity and water. It would be a fine site for a monument. And here's another picture of it. This is from the other side. This is from the, looking down what is now the marina. It was the fishing boat. And so I've been able to get sculpture proposals. Here's one, sculpture proposal A, and here's another one coming up. There we are. Now that is actually a maquette, which doesn't photograph very well, but it is a very fine sculpture done by an internationally renowned artist, and would be very good. That is the second proposal. Third proposal is coming up here now, and there we are. That's a more modern type of sculpture. So we have 3 sculpture proposals. So what I am trying to do is to get a sculpture to not just to this particular incident, but to Portuguese fishermen in general who saved so many from the sea during World War II. Now I want to end really with this what if. Now here's a situation with Germany having occupied the vast majority of Western Europe. Only Britain was holding out, Portugal there holding out, the Azores of course here, Madeira down here. Operation Felix, which they had for the invasion of Spain and Portugal, could have taken place. Here, Germany would have occupied the Azores, and it would then have the means for attack to the United States. So what if? It's a terrifying prospect, but it was realistic. And so this project now only requires $100,000 funding to bring to fruition. Can you help, either directly or by telling others? And I've got one final slide. Oopsie, there's my final slide. Now that's a collage of various wrecks of survivors being rescued by Portuguese fishermen. And if you want to look this up, look it up under www.Portuguese-fishermen-memorial.org, or email me at mikepease@sarpo.pt. And any help would be gratefully appreciated, because I think this is a memorial that needs to be put up. If we had enough money, then perhaps one could be duplicated in the Azores, but that will have to be, remains to be seen. And I think that's about it. And so, Angela, I hope that you've enjoyed the presentation, and I'd be delighted to field any questions that anybody may have.
That was great. Thank you so much, Michael. And we actually do have about 10 minutes for questions. And I see we have our, that's actually not a question, just a comment. But have you received support so far? Are you close to your goal? Or?
Yes, it's a good question. Well, I have, but they're smallish ones, and I've only got a little over $1,000 at the moment in the account that's held by AAPU. So no, I need 1 or 2 really significant contributors to get this project into fruition. And as I've said, it has terrific support in FARO, and yes, it does. It needs quite a lot of money, $100,000, but it could be a fine memorial and it well worthwhile. So the answer to your question is, what I've received to date through the AAPUE account is very modest at the moment.
Right. And if people go to your website, there's an address where they can either mail a check or can they make a donation online?
Yes, indeed, and I'd be happy to send brochures to anybody who'd like a brochure. The brochure is fairly straightforward and doesn't say much more than what I've said before, but it does lead you to the website. The website is the key thing. That's where you will find all the details about how to subscribe, where the money goes to. It's held by AAPU, which is a Portuguese-American friendship organization, and they hold the funds, not me. Yes, it's all there, and I'd be delighted to hear from anybody to support this project. Yes, okay.
Okay. Well, we actually don't have any questions on the line, but I do very much appreciate you taking the time to fill us in on this very worthy project. So we'll go ahead and start the conclusion. As we've mentioned before, all of our webinars are posted to our PALCUS website and our YouTube channel for viewing at any time. So, you know, Michael, if you'd like to share this presentation with other groups, you know, to help raise awareness and raise funds for the project, you're happy to do that. We also provide PDFs of all the presentations that are posted to our website and our Facebook page. We certainly look at all of our webinars as resources to share with friends and family, so we hope you will do that. And with that, I will bid you all a wonderful day, and thank you for attending.
Well, thank you, Angela, for the organization.
All righty.
Have a good day.
Have a good day.
Have a good day,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Bye.